Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to have a really fun conversation. I know that most of you know who the man who fed India is. M.S. Swaminathan was somebody that I studied in school. He was the father of the Green Revolution. We'd all heard that he was considered one of the most influential Asians in the 20th century. And guess who there were three names. One of them was Swaminathan, the other was Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore. So, he was this huge figure, and that's how we grew up. Until I read this book written very lovingly by his niece, Priyambada Jaikumar. And since we have a very short session, it's only about 40 minutes, I'm not going to take too much time talking about the book. We'll let her do that. That's why she's here, and she does it very ably, as she's been taking this book all across the nation and has much to say about it. But I'm going to steer you by asking some questions, if that's okay.
Shobha, hi Kolkata. Actually, this is homecoming. I'm a Kolkata girl. I grew up here. And this is, it feels most familiar of all my cities. And actually, this year I'm starting out my conversation with my only lady interlocutor, which is the lovely and charismatic Shobha. I couldn't be luckier, Shobha, to start the Lit Fest season with you in my favorite city. So thank you all for turning up. Pleasure and privilege to be here. AKLF puts up a stellar show, and the audience is always fun to be with. So, should we roll?
We can roll. Unfortunately, we're starting about an hour earlier than we were scheduled
to start. So I have empty spaces here because those who could make it can't now because they've been stuck. But these are scheduling difficulties which have to be taken into account.
I'm just worried about the attacks we're going to get later when they say you told us it was.
I know I've been attacked all morning, but I've taken it in my stride.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask the lighter questions. The book is. It deals with many of the policy decisions that were made about converting India in some ways from the begging bowl that was a title used about India at a time right after the Calcutta famine. We had a situation where people were starving, in the thousands, in the many hundred thousands.
Millions, actually.
Millions, actually. That's true. There is a documentary done about it recently. Millions, actually. M.S. Swaminathan is the person who was known to have sort of changed that condition from begging bowl to bread basket, to have this surplus and to have a country that was finally, able to feel self-reliant and be looked up again in the world. Before we get into all of that, my question to you is, as a family member writing a biography, and I wrote my own, which they've very kindly put up on the table here. It's interesting when you're writing. In your case too, when you were writing the book, your uncle was alive.
For part of it.
Yeah. When my mother is still with us, and I wrote a biography about her. And, it's interesting for a person writing about someone who's still in the world. What do you choose to put in? What do you choose to leave out? Were there any decisions you had to make from a family perspective to put this book together?
I think the biggest challenge when you're writing about family or writing a biography, whether it's family or not, Shobha, I think the most important thing is to be objective. And I think, for me, putting down family more than being true to who he was, it was more an effort to be honest, to write about who he was. And I didn't have to look very far because, he had a stellar career with surprisingly very few grays. I mean, he's had his fair share of controversy. So yes. When I did come, across the gene robbery debate and the other things, there were no, questions in my mind. I had to put it in because at the end of the day, we can't be human and not be flawed. Absolutely. So I had to have that. So that's what I did. I essentially wanted to keep him balanced, but he's led a very interesting life. Far more interesting than, I would have imagined, because when you meet him, if you ever met him, he was very simple, he was very quiet, he was very soft-spoken. He wouldn't speak beyond a whisper. So it was, sometimes you just train your ears to even listen to him, and I prattle on non-stop. So sometimes, I have to pace myself to even catch what he was saying. But he had a very checkered life, and he caught himself, as I often say, in pockets of history. He was in Birla House when Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated.
I remember reading that, yes.
And that was a fact which was absolutely startling for me, and I didn't know then, and I said, why haven't you ever spoken about it? Yeah. Because he was a Gandhian, and his entire life was devoted to Gandhi's philosophies. So he said, you know, I've had so many such instances. And the fact, you know, when you talk about the Bengal famine, he was training to be a doctor in Kumbakonam. The Bengal famine happened, and it was the height of the Quit India movement. And he said he couldn't tear his eyes away from the front pages of the Hindu, which had millions and billions of people starving, men, women, and children. And he said, you know, for an agricultural country like India, for people to die like this, you know, just not because it was failed monsoons, not because we didn't have anything else, but because it was Winston Churchill's policies of kind of diverting grain, which I think Dr. Tharoor has spoken about very ably whenever he goes, you know, the colonial hangover and of history not, you know, this is not something the Brits are ever taught. Their bit of colonial history is very erased.
Winston Churchill is their hero.
Winston Churchill more than a hero.
Isn't.
He's a rite of passage for most of them. They go gaga today. I mean, today they're dying to have a Winston Churchill in front of the jokers that, you know, who are leading their country. But that apart, I think my entire objective was to keep it very balanced. And I think that is a challenge. I didn't let affection come in the way, because at the end of the day, I was trained to be a historian. And, you know, we are trained to write in a certain way, whether you write dissertations or not. You need to be true to your subject and to history. And, you know, when you write about him, you're essentially charting the course of India's history and its food security issue.
No, I understand that. Obviously, there has to be veracity in anything you do. And this is a true story of a man who was very much a hero. The book has come out in his centenary year.
In his centennial, yes.
And yes, he passed away, but he only passed away a year and a half ago.
23, yes. 3 years.
Okay, 2 years. Yeah. 2 or 3 years ago. But recently, I was more sort of curious whether in the crafting of the book itself, you needed to present him, you've obviously presented him with a soft lens in some ways, and I don't mean to say that you haven't acknowledged that he did focus from just being green revolution into evergreen revolution.
Yes.
And I like that term. I mean, it's not really just your term. It's
No,
a term
it's
that they
a
use
term
about
which kind of espouses
Absolutely.
his living legacy.
Because he believed in self-reliance. You know, just, you don't teach someone, I mean, you don't feed someone a piece of fish, you teach them how to fish.
Yes.
And he did believe in that kind of thinking. Can you tell us a little bit about that? But I still will come back to you to ask a little on the crafting of the book, whether there were ways in which you felt you wanted to focus on some aspects and not. So is it the man or the myth or the humanity aspect of him that you wanted to encourage more for today's readers?
Actually, I think it's a bit of everything. The man behind is important. The myth was, you know, we couldn't be food secure, which is the myth which without him, which he busted in his lifetime. And I have, you know, at the cost of not sounding hagiographical. And, you know, there have been allegations that this might sound hagiographical, but the point of the matter is he was a man who had very, very few shades of gray, and I turned around every archive I could find to get, a little bit, anything which would turn him, a little more interesting. But no, I mean, there were only 3 or 4 instances in his life. But of course, when you talk about the Green Revolution, the greatest kind of criticism is the fact that it unleashed a Frankenstein. Because the Green Revolution you have people like Vandana Shiva and a lot of environmentalists today who will turn around, be jumping off the stage if I say he was all white and not black, or whatever. They turn around and say he was essentially very black, because he's been called the father of cancer in India. Because when you put, the Green Revolution was essentially, a fertilizer and an irrigation guzzler, because we had crops. Before the 1960s, if I just quickly come to this, because, a lot of people don't know about the Green Revolution. In fact, my children, and even my husband, most of us in my generation, we did know about him because we were very much around. But a lot of kids, unless because you're doing CBSE in the +2 section, you don't know about the Green Revolution. So basically, in the 1960s, we didn't have food. We had to be reliant on the United States for something called PL 480, which is Public Law 480, which was, the American Food for Aid program, which Eisenhower had signed into law, which then Lyndon Johnson and any subsequent government which came would give out food, surplus food. Actually, that food was meant for cattle in the US. Do you know that? It was absolutely horrible. Trust the Americans to package crap, and sell it, to others. And we're still kind of buying that.
We were buying.
Yeah, and we still were. But then we had no option. Our monsoons would fail, our crops would fail, and every time we had to depend on these ships laden with grain. So finally, Mrs. Gandhi, she was at the helm. You had Nehru, then he passed away, then there was Gulzari Lal Nanda and an interim government, then you had Lal Bahadur Shastri, he also popped it, and then up came Mrs. Gandhi. And Mrs. Gandhi was the least expected to deliver, because Kamraj had settled her. Yes, she actually had a very close, yes, true. She had a very close relationship with MS, and she finally told MS, when can you give me your magic seeds? Because I'm tired and I want to get the bloody Americans off my back. Lyndon Johnson would use grain as conditional diplomacy. She couldn't take a stand on Vietnam. She couldn't take a stand on Pakistan. She couldn't do anything. She could do zilch.
We still have a transactional president
We
in
do,
America.
but you know, that's exactly why it's so interesting and why the book is so timely. Because, yes, because what we went through the 1960s is exactly what we are going through now with Trump and all the, you know, the hand-wringing and saying Modi has to keep me happy and he knows he has to keep me happy. And how happy, not just happy, how happy. So I think we've been through this, but Mrs. Gandhi prevailed. She held her nerve against a very, very, very tough American government. And more than that, it was her own government which had no faith in these hybrid seeds because you had to give out 5 crores from your exchequer to get 18,000 tons of grain. Those seeds which came from Mexico was the largest seed shipment in the history of the world. Norman Borlaug, who was the American Nobel laureate for peace, for food, he gave Professor Swaminathan
The Nobel
seeds.
came for this effort.
The Nobel,
Yes, he was
singularly
not-
for this effort.
Exactly. But
Almost
MS
3 years-
Swaminathan knew him before he won the
Yes,
Nobel.
MS Swaminathan knew him a decade before when they were in Wisconsin.
Exactly.
They bumped into each other at Rite Aid, one of the
So he
pharmacies.
has had a very privileged life. He's had a life of access in
Yes.
some ways, and you're not discounting that, I know.
No,
in
no,
the
no,
book.
no. The book
He's
makes
had
it
the-
very clear that
Right.
it was,
He had the
it was a
benefit
life
of-
of privilege and honor and kind
and
of
education,
Yes.
and education.
But those days, that was privilege. Today, privilege
That
is
is.
accounted for in totally different metrics. Today,
And-
we are privileged in very different ways. But MS Swaminathan, in those days, I mean, but of course, you know, I've been asked this question, how did the India in the 1960s, which had Vikram Sarabhai, again, from a very, very stellar family, the Sarabhais of Ahmedabad, they were absolutely, you know, flush. But they were change makers. They kind of changed India's history. But today, I mean, those of privilege, and of course, privilege is accounted in very different metrics, as I said. They went on to change history, but MS Swaminathan was given a very plum position in the US, and they asked him to stay on. He said, but you know, I came to equip myself to go and serve my country at almost nothing. He comes back from the US without a job, and he was packaging pharmaceuticals in a cousin's factory when history intervened. And then we had the Green Revolution, which it was the greatest agricultural reorganization of India in 4,000 years since the time of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. We had so much grain, which was, the land was vomiting grain. It was so much grain in the 1960s that you had granaries, couldn't, you know, store it. So they had to open up schools, cinema halls in the summer to kind of hoard the grains.
yes, that was very interesting. I read that they had to open up places
Yes.
which were...
And it was unprecedented. They didn't exactly expect it to be so successful. He knew it was going to be moderately successful, and he knew his bet wasn't going to backfire.
and he went from wheat to rice as well.
He did,
grew
but
it.
rice was not so successful. It was essentially wheat,
wheat.
which took on very well. Actually, the king of hybrid rice is Yuan Longping, who's from China. But the reason, if coming back
Can we
to
just
the-
go back a little bit
Yeah.
about how he started this whole process, which I found very interesting, trying to convince farmers to do something different.
that's the
so
epilogue,
tell
yes.
that story about him
The epilogue,
working
yes.
on the Sundays.
You know, I'll tell you, at the end of the day, MS said that, look, I was a scientist, I had these hybrid seeds. So what they did was they took the Indian seeds. Why did we have to hybridize seeds? Now I'll have to come to that. Our normal grains were tall. So if you put too much water and fertilizer at the base, they topple over. It was called toppling over. They double over because the stems were long. So the Mexican variety was short. So when you marry a tall and a long, you get something reasonably tiny. That's me. My mother was very short. My dad's exceptionally tall. So then you had a shorter stemmed grain, which withstood the extra fertilizers in the water. So then it didn't topple over. And that raised, the food production quintuple times. And he did it in the Indian Agricultural Research Institute, the grounds. He trialed it there. And then for 7 weeks, he'd have these magic seeds in his pocket, and he'd go around Jaunti, which was near the Haryana border, which is part of Haryana today. And he'd go, knocking on every farmer's doors and say that, we have these seeds. Will you at least try it on your, fields? Because I know it's worked. They turn around and say, "Paise dijiye." He turn around and say, "Hamare paas
Or they'll
paise
say,
nahi
why?
hai."
Why would we work with something new and we
No,
don't
they
even know
want,
the
they were okay to do it if you paid them. So he
okay.
said that told them that, look, I don't have money to give you. We just don't have money. But if you try this, you will get money because this is increased production. 7 weeks, he goes around knocking on doors with 3 intrepid scientists. Sometimes, my cousins, his children, would go on a Sunday to play with the Persian wheel. And for them, it would be a picnic because my uncle was always out. And then one fine day, one intrepid farmer turns around and tells him that you've been coming every day for 7 weeks, I'm going to try your seeds. He said, what changed your mind? This is the third time I've knocked on your door.
Right.
He said, because you're coming on a Sunday, you're not getting paid to do this. So because if you worked in government, you'd work from Monday to Fridays, and you were not going to be paid to come on public holidays and with your family. That one leap of faith, and that's what I keep telling everybody, that one leap of faith actually changed India's fortunes.
And there's
that
some
was
lovely anecdotes like that in this book.
there is, that is actually the epilogue. That's how the Green Revolution kind of kicked off. So it was the faith of one farmer. And more importantly, Shobha, I was wanting to point out one thing. He was a Gandhian who believed in two philosophies of Antodaya and Sarvodaya. Sarvodaya is welfare for all. But Antodaya, more importantly, is welfare from the bottoms up, point of view. So that the poorest get access to, resources first. And then those who have it come and look for it. So he said, I trialed the seeds in the farms of the poorest farmers first, and not the richest, so that, I couldn't be accused of giving it to people who had access.
Exactly.
So once these, the seeds kind of started spewing out this, massive, unimaginable amount of grain, there was so much clamor that I think Maneka Gandhi's father, who was a very famous landowner, he came down to this field and said, "Ye kya chamatkar hua hai? Kahan se liya aapne?" So the clamor reached the richest, and then word of mouth spread, and that's, I think, how history was made. But it was always his philosophy that you had to give it to the poor first to try, and not the other way around.
And if you go back to his childhood, why don't you tell them a story about his childhood? In many ways, his father was a very progressive, he was part of a very traditional, the father was an exception. What I mean is he grew up in a traditional Tamilian Brahmin household, which has its own access as well as its own reputation for being, perhaps patriarchal or very strict about its religious practices, etc. Whereas he grew up in a home where
but
they
all of that was
opened
debunked.
Yeah.
Essentially, his father was a doctor, and that's what I said he was playing.
a doctor who served everybody.
Doctor who served the Dalits, more importantly, much to the chagrin of everybody in the villages who turn around and say, you're breaking bread with them, Dalits are coming and sitting and eating in your home. When his mother passed away, when
They didn't come to do the service.
Yes,
and
when his mother, M. Swaminathan's grandmother passed away, the Brahmin priest said, we're not going to do your last rites because it's been ashuddhi happening all the time. Plus, he just returned from Vienna, where he'd gone for his surgeon's degree, and he said, you haven't done a Shuddhikaran and all that. So he said, to hell with you and your Shuddhikaran, I don't care, I'll do it on my own. So him and his three brothers, they went and did the last rite. But MS grew up in a family which was not just very egalitarian, it was also very, very kind of
progressive
different
for the
and
time.
much more. And he grew up seeing Mahatma Gandhi stay with him as a child. Mahatma Gandhi, C. Rajagopalachari, all of them came and stayed with him. His father was a Gandhian and a freedom fighter in more ways than one. Even the Vaikom Satyagraha, which is talked about so beautifully in Dr. Tharoor's new book, that was also a huge part of their, their life. So he saw history kind of unfold itself even in his own childhood. And from that background, there was a sense of service to the nation because these were founding fathers. I certainly think MS was part of a legion of founding fathers. For him, he said that one instance of the Bengal famine changed his mind. He said, I couldn't sleep. He said, you could have had a country of 1,000 doctors. You don't need another doctor. You need somebody to actually look at food. How do you go from here and never come back to this place again? That is what is most important. And that is exactly what the Green Revolution did. It unleashed history on our food plates. Because I think, there is so much which happens, discrepancy, which happens from a simple plate of food. That one access is what determines so much later on in life. And I think that is what he did. I mean, Gandhi gave us freedom in general. MS gave us freedom from hunger. And I think that truly is what makes him so exemplary.
It's just wonderful to hear your passion about the project and about this man.
No, but it is.
Do you have any personal stories to share? Did his family members, for instance, want you to include some stories that you...
No, they wanted me to get rid of a few, actually, because they said that, we don't want Appa to be put under these lens. But I fought back. I said, no, I'm going to do it in any case. Because,
there isn't really anything in it.
Because that is exactly who he was.
Because he himself questioned himself towards the end.
He did. No, he did. He was like, when we talk about his Green Revolution becoming... a Frankenstein or a behemoth which he had unleashed on the ground. He was the first one in 1968 to see that, the Green Revolution slowly morphing into the Greed Revolution. And if we don't watch out, we are in for, a season of misery. That's why he said that, we have to look at the Evergreen Revolution, which is production in perpetuity without additional ecological factors, which is what the Green Revolution did. But in general, he was actually one of the sweetest people I've ever met. And he was passionate about politics. I had often
And
asked
he had access to a lot
Yes.
of politicians all over the world.
Yes, yes. Mrs. Gandhi was a personal friend. He was the only man I know who could land up wherever she was without an appointment, and he would be waived to go in. He wrote the 1984 manifesto for Mrs. Gandhi days before she was assassinated, in which she told him that, MS, I want you to include the farmer's point of view. She was at the height of Operation Blue Star at that point.
Didn't Obama use some of his words as
Yes,
well in his speech?
President Obama used Evergreen Revolution, Shobha, when he addressed the joint sitting of Parliament. And then the next evening, there was a session at the American ambassadors. And then he was introduced to MS and said that, this is the person whose words, you've spoken about. And MS had access to, I don't know, countless presidents and prime ministers. In fact, have you heard of Cheddi Jagan, who was from Guyana? Cheddi Jagan, an Indian who was the Guyanese president who John F. Kennedy actually, was a CIA coup to actually have him unseated, which is exactly what's happening with Maduro. He had access to almost every president and prime minister that I can think of in the 1970s and the 1980s. More importantly, he was part of the revolution in Philippines. My book was exactly written just to debunk one major myth that he was just an agricultural scientist. I do believe that he was a diplomat. He was an exceptional kind of institution builder. And he was also India's greatest kind of emissary abroad. So in 1982 to 1988, he was the Director General of the International Rice Research Institute, which is in Los Baños in Philippines. At that time, there were a lot of, the Marcos regime was under great attack by the students. So one afternoon, the students come and tell him that, look, this is the night Marcos is going to be unseated, and we want the institute's buses to take all the students to Manila so that we can help Cory Aquino's efforts. So he was in a quandary, because if the revolution had failed, he would be jailed for treason, for going against Marcos. But he said that I had a feeling that, we were on the precipice of making history. So he quietly told his bus drivers, and those are buses for the institute's children, those who went to American schools, there were school buses. He said, just go and drop them to Manila and quietly come back. It was the night when Marcos was actually unseated, and he was lifted by the Americans within hours and airlifted out, and Cory Aquino was made president the next morning. The first thing she did was call him and say, what do you want me to do? How can I thank you for this?
Exactly.
Because he was, and that's when I said, Shobha, he found himself in essentially huge pockets of history. And I think before anything else, the National Commission of Farmers is what he chaired in, right after, in 2004, when he was asked by the UPA government. That not being turned into law, I think, was his one greatest living regret. And in fact, Rahul Gandhi...
He was in the Rajya Sabha before that,
he was
right?
he was a nominated member of the Rajya Sabha by APJ Abdul Kalam from 2012 to, I think, 17. But he didn't get a chance to even debate it. He wanted to introduce the Women's Farmers Entitlement Bill. Because, more than anything else, I remember him as a feminist. He turned around and said, what is the first thing which comes to your mind when you think of a farmer? I said, a man on a bullock cart. He said, wrong. It's actually a woman in a bullock cart. It's not a man, because the feminization of agriculture has been going on for millennia. But no women have been given credit for it at all. So I think that was his greatest crusade, and he wanted to introduce a bill.
But we don't have enough of that in here.
There is. In one chapter, Shobha, there was
read the book.
98 years of writing. The original book was 777 pages. HarperCollins looks at me and says, now, Tina Narang, she was your editor as well. She looked at me and said, this has to be made half, Priyampada. Nobody's going to read 777 pages. So imagine taking a pair of scissors and going chop, chop, chop. You don't know which bits to chop out. So I kept the most interesting bit. But if I did put everything in, that would make an even more compelling story.
But you're right. You do say, for instance, that he said, I remember my father used to say, he said, my legacy or my gift is my children. And I think Swaminathan said something very similar.
Yes.
That his daughters were his gift to the world,
yes,
or something. And
no, because somebody asked him, you've got 3 daughters. Did you crave for a son? Because that even in Tamil Nadu.
It was the greatest gift.
He said, but I have never made any difference between girls and boys, and I wouldn't even know how to even differentiate that or put it out there, because they did what children were meant to do. So I think he found, that was the whole purpose of the book in his centennial year, to present him as somebody who was who went well beyond agriculture, and I hope I've been able to do that.
You have been able to do that. And there were some sections, I he faced a lot of difficulty
He did.
starting out.
Yeah.
Despite what he wanted to do.
Well,
there were people in power who tried to stop
there
him.
were many people in power. The Communist Party of India had a field day. Jyoti Basu had a great time kind of, running him down, saying that this is not going to happen. You had VKRV round the government. Why did the Green Revolution take 2 years to deploy? The seeds were already there. Simply because there was just so much internal strife in the government itself. Mrs. Gandhi and MS were backed into a corner. Because unless in fact, I've said that on record, Mrs. Gandhi walked a very lonely road with her scientists and her farmers. Because if she went, took anything from her own government and took anything from her own cabinet was against it. But it was C. Subramaniam who at that stage was the agriculture minister who had a great sense that this was actually going to work. Something intuition goes a very long way even in changing history. And MS said that, the people who mattered read my pulse. And that is what made a difference. There were many naysayers. I'm not saying that this was easy. It wasn't easy. If we didn't have so many naysayers, the Green Revolution would have come much earlier, and we would have been rid of hunger much earlier. But it didn't. It came when it had to, simply because both Mrs. Gandhi and Professor Swaminathan were backed out against a tide of opposition from within the government who said, what if this fails? You want 5 crores? What if it fails? We could have had hospitals, we could have had schools, we could have had roads, we could have so many things going. In the 1960s, imagine the state we were in. He says, but we have to do it because otherwise we will never be able to politically call the shots. In fact, APJ Abdul Kalam said that...
In fact, one of the best things that happened to India is that losing that dependence on the USA.
That stranglehold, not even a dependence, it was a stranglehold.
Exactly.
So MS said that, if we didn't have food security, Mrs. Gandhi would have never been able to do 1971 and Bangladesh would have never been born, no matter what happens today.
Absolutely.
You try and erase history, but Mrs. Gandhi wouldn't have been able to pull that off. And she was called Durga for a reason. She rode on the backs of farmers. And if we didn't have food security, we won't have Pokhran as well. Smiling
It's the same everywhere, all over the world.
But food
when
security...
you're vulnerable,
yes,
other people can be in charge.
But that vulnerability was broken simply because we could be food secure. He said, I knew we had it in us. We just needed that opportunity. Right. And that is what we did. But then again, he found himself, had it not been Mrs. Gandhi, I almost ask myself this all the time. What if the Green Revolution was unleashed today? How would he have kind of
I want to
managed
ask you
it?
that.
I think, he would have not been given credit at all. It would have been the government's propaganda. You would have had Modi or anybody. I'm in a very friendly state, so I can open my mouth and say this. But you'd probably have Modi riding, a bullock, or sitting behind the furrow and saying, "Hamari ye to Vikshit Bharat yahan se shuru hua tha."
Right.
But you talk about that Atmanirbharta and self-reliance. The Green Revolution is India's first indigenous example of Atmanirbharta and self-reliance. You can say anything you want, take this to town, but this is exactly where it started. I had no Modi in the picture. He was probably 11 years old and selling chai somewhere, for all I know.
So have you... I don't mean this in a sort of mean or a mischievous
but be mean,
way.
it's fine.
But have you
Just
taken,
charming being mean
have you
also.
taken this book to farmers anywhere?
I have. I
Okay.
had 50 farmers at my launch,
Oh, so tell me about that.
Your brother was there. He was on my
He's
panel.
not a farmer,
No,
though.
he's not a farmer. Listen to me. He's not a farmer. But he said, how do you have so many farmers? I said, I just called up somebody in Patiala and said that, Swaminathan ji ke bare mein hai. He said, हम क्या 100 लोग आ सकते हैं? I said, आप जितना आना चाहते हैं, आ सकते हैं. 50 of them turned up, and I told them, I said, can I give you something for conveyance, at least for travel, or, for food? He said, हम कुछ नहीं लेंगे. हमारे घर में वाहेगुरु जी की तस्वीर है और स्वामीनाथन जी की तस्वीर है. हम श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करने आए हैं. We've come to pay homage to the man who gave us food security, who actually gave us dignity. Because what he essentially did, and I think that's where, today, where I think a lot of us don't know, is that he made agriculture respectable. He gave respectability to farmers. We were caught in a sense of doom and gloom about agriculture. He brought it out of that very, very significantly. And the farmer turned around to me and said...
Keralites are very proud of him as well.
Yes.
And they keep saying, he's a Malayali, he's from Kumbakonam.
No, he used to call him...
So when I told a uncle of mine that said, what are you reading now? I said, I'm reading M.S. Swaminathan's book. The Priya.
Yes.
And he said, oh, he is a Malayali. yes.
Yes,
He's not
but
a
he's an
Malayali.
honorary Malayali.
He's an honorary Malayali.
He used to always turn around and tell me, I am a Madrasi by birth, but by heart I'm a Malayali. I say that with great passion everywhere.
Good.
Great claps in Kerala.
And he's
They
a
love it.
Punjabi and a Haryani from
No, but that
by
is-
heart
But you
as
know,
well.
the Green Revolution truly, Shobha, as you very rightly said, is the story of India. A Tamil Brahmin scientist with broken Hindi managing the biggest miracle on the land with Punjabi farmers. This can only happen in India. Unity in true diversity. I think that was the story of the book. That, you know, he was able to do this because it was India at the end of the day. We weren't segregated into regions, populations, languages. India, the whole is more than the sum of the parts. That's what I keep saying. That was the story, the moral of the story. The
So-
whole is more than the sum of the parts.
I love your energy, your passion. You have so many stories to tell. Let me ask you, go back a little bit again to the craft of the book.
Huh.
Okay? How long did it take you to write this book? One. And
Yes.
two, what was the most interesting aspect of writing it and what was the most frustrating aspect of writing it?
Okay, it took me 2 years. This was a lockdown project. I live in Singapore where I've got 3 kids, a 19-year-old daughter and 2 boys of 14 and 12. And we weren't allowed to go out anywhere. Singapore being Singapore, they said either stay in or go out. If you go out, you can't come back. So what do? You're bouncing off walls. And I think, driving my husband mad. So he said, listen, why don't you write?
Take up
Because
a project,
Take
Priyambada.
So get on my back. So that's
He
exactly what he
needed-
said. And then, I caught a tweet by MS. He was tweeting at 96. At 96, I caught a tweet by him saying that, listen, for an India that we built, this was the height of the migrant crisis when you had all these migrant workers with literally their lives on their backs strapped walking out. He said, this is not the India we sacrificed so much for. I
You would
caught
have been
that tweet.
heartbroken to see Homebound.
He was.
No, he didn't see Homebound, though.
No, Homebound came by, Homebound incidentally is written by my best friend.
Really?
Yes,
How
the
lovely.
scriptwriter is my best friend from St. Stephen's, history honors again, a year junior. So he turned on it, so I read it and I called him up. I said, he says, and he was very frail at that stage. At 96, he was very frail. And he said, I'm just very heartbroken because this is not the India we gave up so much for. And then I asked him, I said, when was the last time a book was written about you? He turned around and told me there have been no books really written about me. They've been written about the Green Revolution, and that was that. That set my head on fire, and my husband looked at me and said, well, you have something, now go on and write it. So I first read every book that was written about him. Please, this is not the first book. This is likely the first book about him as the man behind the revolution. Everything will tell you about the lysine content of wheat without
The
telling
man
you
who
anything.
fed India,
Without
which
telling
is-
you much about him.
Right.
So that was my impetus. What was the most challenging thing? Again, as I said, 777 pages of effort whittled down to 384. That too, my son tells me, it's 384 pages. If I read 2 pages, can I play 2 hours of FIFA? I mean, that is exactly the transactional nature of, reading. They were like, it's so many pages. Why did you write so much? Can you imagine if I unleashed 777
Well,
pages?
it would have
of
been
that?
harder on me
No,
for sure.
no, Shobha. So, now I was being
But
kind.
I did learn a lot.
I was being kind. And the most uplifting thing was that, in 90, or equally demoralizing is that in 98 years, he's done so much, which, in my 40 plus years, I'd never be able to achieve. And that, I think, is a regret because, you have one lifetime. And there's only so much you can do. And he did this plus this and some more. I mean, that's the thing. This
That's
and some
amazing,
more.
yeah.
And that leaves me till 98. He was doing, in fact, I believe at the height of the farmers' agitation, PM Modi called him up to, I was privately told that he was asked to put out a statement in service of the farmers. And he said, I'm only going to turn around. He said, I'm only going to tell the government one thing, that if you do not listen to the farmers, you're looking at another revolution being unleashed. But he
Good.
refused to take any sides. He said, at the end of the day, I'm a humble farmer too. And his greatest reward, more than even being given the Bharat Ratna, which I think was sadly given after he
After
died,
he passed
simply
away.
because it was an election
But he won
ploy.
the Padma Bhushan before that. or
He's,
Padma
he's been awarded all of them.
and the
from
Magsaysay Award.
He was one of the first.
And that is an incredible, I mean,
the Magsaysay Award was one of the first international ones. No, but he's been conferred the Padma Shri, the Padma Bhushan, the Padma Vibhushan, and the Bharat Ratna was long awaited. But the trouble is, it came after he died. There's no point giving it to him then. Of course, they did it because, it was 2024, just very smartly 2 months before the election. I've gone to town to say that, this was very much an election ploy. And you had to keep, the farmers' peace. In fact, Rahul Gandhi goes up even at that stage, says, when we come back into power, we are going to implement this. Hello, what were you doing in 2004 when this was unleashed by your government? You didn't do anything then. Right. So I think that was it. When I read his life, I realized that, we didn't have much to do. I think, Shobha, we have to take questions
sorry.
now.
It's, we have 6 minutes to go.
6.5 minutes to go.
If you have
any
questions, she'll answer anything.
No.
Ask Priyambada these questions, and if you don't have questions, we'll ask her some more. It's delightful when you have an author with such passion about her work.
Yeah, do we have a mic?
Do we have a mic?
Does anybody have a mic on? Because I won't be able to hear.
Good evening.
Hi. Good evening.
Very passionate, almost strident. And
yes,
I say that
true.
only because you had a question, a rhetorical question. What would he do in terms of the Green Revolution if it was executed now?
Unleashed today, yes.
Doesn't it seem very naive that this was such an important project for the Prime Minister, and he was working with the Prime Minister and trying to unshackle themselves, and it was brought down to an individual walking down to the farmer's home and not having a full project plan, and they had no idea how to scale it? Doesn't it sound very, very ludicrous and naive?
You mean...
Unfortunate.
And could that not be a weakness, since you've not been mentioning some of the weaknesses? Wasn't it a little naive that if this was so important and this was a diktat from the Prime Minister, this needed much more planning on a much larger scale?
No, this was not a diktat. Thank you for the question. Very interesting question. No, it wasn't a diktat from the Prime Minister. It was a collaborative effort between Mrs. Gandhi and the farmers and policy. Because I have made it very clear in the book as well that, you can have policies and you have a very fleshed out plan. But if you do not have political support, it is not going to go anywhere. It turns out to be a paper tiger. He had a full-fledged plan. It was Mrs. Gandhi who supported him. There were murmurs within the government that, it was a money problem. We didn't have money at that stage to do, to give out 5 crores, to get in 18,000, tons of, seeds. And what if it didn't, it went gangbusters and it didn't do well? What would you have done then? That money could have gone somewhere else. But there was a massive plan, and part of the plan was convincing the farmers. And it was, I wouldn't call it naivety at all, and it wasn't a diktat. Mrs. Gandhi was exceptionally collaborative. In fact, I believe that this worked simply because Mrs. Gandhi walked a very lonely and a very tiring road, backed out even against her own government to support the farmers and the scientists. Because until you have political will, nothing works. You can have the best ideas on paper, you can have 20 stages listed out, point after point after point. But if the government of the day turns around and says, this is not going to work, hello, it lies dead on a piece of paper with 20 lines, underlined, tabbed, whatever you call it. However grand your plans are, it's not going to move the needle if the government turns around and says, hello, we are not on this at all. But Mrs. Gandhi didn't do that. She took the bait, and it was a very, very critical bait. She would have lost the next election. It would have been the end of her legacy as well.
If the seeds hadn't
Yes, if the seeds hadn't sprouted that kind of wheat, Mrs. Gandhi would have been a footnote in history today, along with Swaminathan and many others. So it's not fair to say that there was no plan. There was a plan, and if it wasn't for Mrs. Gandhi's support, I don't think this would have happened. You could have ambitious plans, but at the end of the day, the government has to say yes. And that is exactly what's happening in Delhi today. Many people have put together plans to tackle the AQI, but if the government doesn't play ball, hello, you're not getting out of that hellhole that you find yourself in at all. The government has to play along with you.
But many people crafting plans, it's too many cooks spoil the broth and nothing gets off the table. Any other questions? We still have 2.5 minutes.
There is one question at the back.
Hi, I just bought your book.
Hi, thanks.
I was just skipping to the pages, a few colored images. I saw a pic of Varghese Kurian with him.
Yes. Oh, how
So-
interesting. That's my
Amal's
favorite.
story.
That's my
Yeah.
favorite.
So
I
was
should have
wanted
brought
to,
that up.
Hear their anecdotes between them, or they
Yes.
had some collaboration or influence on each other, or inspiration
Yes,
between
yes,
them.
yes,
So I
yes.
need to hear something
Very
about that.
quickly, I'll tell you. The reason why do we have Amul milk chocolate in India? Because of M.S. Swaminathan. He was in touch with Francophone Africa, and the French government calls him up and says, we have a surplus of cocoa beans. What, do you want to do something about it? Yeah. So he calls the Verghese Korean and says, I have a surplus of cocoa beans. What are you going to do about it? He said, send it over. That's the birth of Amul chocolate, milk chocolate. Now, well, that actually is my favorite photograph in the entire book because it has the father of the White Revolution, which is Verghese Korean, and the father of the Green Revolution. And they were very close friends and they worked together very, very closely. In fact, I think in those days, even all scientists, whether it was Verghese Korean or Vikram Sarabhai, anybody, they worked in tandem together. They were very, very closely linked. And, that is how I think India was able to be, sufficient in milk production, food production, simply because, we worked in tandem. And I feel, those kind of linkages today are missing because everything, again, is top-down. Those days, it was bottoms-up. I mean, I think that is a crucial difference.
Any more questions?
I think
We'd love to hear some questions. Anything from here? No?
But at least they ask questions.
Yes.
In Kerala, no, they scratched their heads. They sat over there and they were like looking, it was time. They were like,
Really?
Yes, in Kerala. Kerala, hello. I was in Kerala. I looked, I said, this is his birthland. They were like, oh, we have,
But you were at the Manorama Hortus.
Yes.
You need to go to Thiruvananthapuram or to Calicut and then you can...
I am in Calicut.
Okay,
I
good.
am and in Thiruvananthapuram, I'll tell you if it's different. But at least in my city, people stand up and ask questions, but then that's my city. We love asking questions.
Well, you certainly woke up to some wonderful ideas, right?
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank
you
you,
were
Priyambada.
fabulous.
I merely tried to say, you just need to sway the needle a little bit and Priyambada will take the conversation.
No, but
So I'm
thank you.
delighted.
Thank you, Kolkata. And thank you, Shobha.
Thank you. And
You've
you
been-
gave me an opportunity to read a book.
Yes,
that
but
I
you
would-
have the older version, which I'm quite miffed about. Because the newer version has got a few more photographs. In fact, you got the newer version. That's got Verghese Korean's photograph. The older version did. I don't think it was there. Because by the time I got the rights from Verghese Korean's family, it went into the secondary print.
So how many of you think this should be translated into Hindi? I think it should.
It's being taken up as a film. So you are going
Oh.
to be able to watch this as a film. We have a lot of offers, in town from the South. The South is very keen. Malayalam filmmakers are also very keen. And
But
so
they
are
want to do
Tamil.
a biopic of MS Swaminathan's life.
Yes, chapters 4 and 5, The Green Revolution, which of course will be about him and Norman Borlaug and all that. But the Bollywood film industry has also come forward with quite a few good ideas. And now I have to wait and see who actually will make it fact and not fiction. Because my greatest worry is that, you're going to have a Bollywood potboiler at the end of the day, which isn't the worst thing because you're not looking at a documentary, but you need something, I can't have him dancing in fields and Salman Khan is saying his role. That would be quite, that actually might be fun to think about. Or even Akshay Kumar doing it. Akshay Kumar would be thrilled with something like this. But I think, well, it says time's up. Thank you, Kolkata, for being a fabulous audience and for me coming back home. And it was a privilege to speak to you, Shobha.
Thank you,
You've been the
Priyambada,
best.
for this opportunity. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.